in the broader meat trade. Take, for example, New Zealand versus Brazil. If you're making halal meat in Brazil and you're not stunning and you're exporting to the EU, you're going to be treated differently than if you're making halal meat in New Zealand and you're required to stun. Why is that fair? Shouldn't they be able to compete on equal ground in the absence of a real scientific base to make this determination and with the recognition that we should accommodate religious practice? Therein lies the rub with regard to the international trade issues. The EU is bound by international trade agreements that it signed as a WTO member, and if passed, Amendment 205 would constitute a breach of that. I'll quickly run through this where it gets kind of technical legal, but this is the important test. It's the technical barriers to trade agreements, Article 2.2. It says technical regulations shall not be more trade restrictive than necessary to fulfill a legitimate objective, taking account of the risk that non-fulfillment would create. So we got two issues: legitimate objective and no more trade restrictive than necessary. As we've discussed before, legitimate objective, well, frankly, consumer information hasn't even been recognized by the WTO jurisprudence as a basis upon which you can engage in trade restrictive measures. But let's assume it was. Let's assume it was. It certainly can't be a lopsided consumer information delivery that would justify trade restrictive measures. It would have to be all the information. But even if they get past that hurdle, which I don't think they can or should, member states must achieve that objective using measures that are no more trade restrictive than necessary. Well, you know, there's a simple way to do that, and it's called voluntary labeling. If you're a manufacturer who wants to hold themselves out to a higher standard, like our organic friends did some years ago, or energy efficient appliances, you come out and you say, I humanely treat the animal before I slit its throat. If there's some consumer base that really wants to know it, and it isn't really based in sort of this undercurrent of distrust and animosity for religious groups, then let them do it that way. That way, the consumers who want that information get it from the manufacturers who care to hold themselves out to be that way. And at the same time, we're not going to be treating those who manufacture halal meats without stunning on an unequal footing to their competitors. And again, within the EU, there are various certifications within countries that are voluntary labeling. This works just fine. That is, my wife only buys organic milk. She has absolutely no problem finding that organic milk. Do you know why? Because the organic milk people say there's a demand for it. They make it. They clearly label it on a voluntary basis. And my wife goes and buys it. I mean, I'm missing the point. That is, if there's such a big consumer demand for this stunned meat, the capital markets will make it so. And again, there was an article in the New York Times 2 weeks ago. I left New York, I live here now in London, but I still can't get away from the New York Times. 2 weeks ago, there was an article that ran about a company called Bell and Evans and Mary's Chickens, who are working in some new style of gas stunning where they phase it in and they say it just lulls the chickens to sleep before they kill them. And they're saying this is the most state-of-the-art, technologically advanced, most humane method. And the whole article was about how they're working with the brightest minds in marketing to figure out how they're going to market this to consumers. So the ideas they came up with were for voluntary labels were sedation stunning, humanely slaughtered, humanely processed, humanely handled. The point is, there are plenty of bright people thinking about how you can do a voluntary labeling scheme that isn't discriminatory, that allows you to bring whatever you want to bring to the market and to the consumer. This is just a more technical legal argument. I'll skip it. Important point here, the EU has recognized that the imposition of mandatory labeling regimes would be contrary to its world trade obligations. How did I find this? I did some digging, and this was a report that they wrote when they were considering mandatory labeling for how chickens are treated before they hatch eggs. And they decided that they were going to require European Union countries to disclose on the label how the chickens are treated. But they weren't going to make that same request or that same demand of people exporting eggs to the European Union. Why? Because of this very issue. Because they said it would raise significant problems within the WTO. And it says, while mandatory labeling would face more controversy in the WTO framework. Quick word about our engagement activities so far. We did position papers. I know Abdulhamid has them. You can certainly contact him for them. They'd be translated in any language that would be relevant to any stakeholder. We've met so far with the countries, the ambassadors or their seconds within Brussels, with Argentina, Australia, Bolivia, Brazil, Indonesia, Uruguay, and Qatar. Qatar was very interesting. I think it's going to lead to further things. And I will end by saying that the fight is very much on. I think New Zealand, we have to win European Union on this labeling thing, and I think we will. New Zealand is the big target for me, because that is a recent country that is one of the largest exporters of meat to the Muslim world, that has basically banned the ability to slaughter without stunning. And I'd say watch that space. And while the Jewish community has filed a lawsuit within New Zealand to challenge that provision under various legal arguments, my plea here today is the Muslim world is a lot bigger than the Jewish world. A lot bigger. Leverage that power. Leverage it. And you will win this issue. If you think stunning is okay under halal, what about your brothers and sisters and cousins and everyone else who doesn't? They should have the right to have that quality meat from a consumer, or from a country that cares and accommodates your needs. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Philip. Thank you very much. I've been looking forward to hearing that presentation since I had the first telephone conversation with him and invited him to attend. We have a little bit of time before lunch, not too much, around 15 minutes, but what I would like to do, in the interest of moving towards action on this issue, I want to hear comments on how we can address these issues from three different panelists who I'll ask to come up, please. Abu Bakr Riga, the President of the European Muslim Union, Dr. Shuja Shafi, the Deputy Secretary General of Muslim Council of Britain, and Navid Syed, the CEO of Janan Meats. If everyone has a little just come in. No, just jump around so it's okay. What I'd like to do, what we could debate forever about stunning and not stunning and all of these things, but I think what Philip has really presented to us is that we have an opportunity to act on this, and I would really like to see some kind of outcome come from this forum based on the issues that he's raised. And I think I would like to ask from our three panelists who represent different sections within the Muslim community and also within the industry, and I'd like to get their views on how they think that this issue of the European proposed legislation, how something significant could be done on this issue. And maybe I'll start on my right with Haji Abu Bakr. Thank you very much. Let's make a comment. Haji Abu Bakr is the President of the European Muslim Union, and when he first saw about this issue, he contacted me and said, we're interested in taking this issue on.
Thank you very much. Well, first of all, I want to congratulate my opponent, because I found this presentation very pleasant. There was one specific phrase which took my attention quite a bit, which was we have facing in Europe the process to denormalize religious practice. I think that was very brilliant. I absolutely agree to that, and we see that in many fields, in the politics, in the media, and in our everyday life. I'm also thinking, because Mr. Pfeiffer is sharing my own profession, and I don't want to make here a promotion for lawyers, but I must say, I have to acknowledge, I mean, that was the most brilliant presentation in the political terms, also about the situation about halal slaughtering in Europe. So it confirms something I had in mind since a longer time. And we, as an organization, the European Muslim Union, we have also an under-organization called Muslim Lawyers. Because I believe all these issues and the debate about halal slaughtering, it's very important that the lawyers take a leading role. I think there are two reasons for that, because the lawyers naturally, specifically if they are Muslim lawyers, we understand the Islamic law as we understand the European law. And that kind of battle and debate, I think you have to understand the depth of the affair. So I think that is in Europe, I think, it has a dimension into the public. So I think all our Muslim lawyers have to be very, very active on that. So what my practical suggestion would be on that, or the impression of what Mr. Pfeiffer said, I think we have to connect the lawyers very much in the European Union, or the Muslim lawyers, but they have also to work together with all the Jewish lawyers, obviously, because they are the experts on this case. I think that could have a dimension of the NGO, which would also advise all our religious bodies in Europe how to deal with the situation. I think also the regulatory body about halal slaughtering should not be politicians, nor should it be industrialists. It should be lawyers, really people who are committed to the law. But also quite practically, I would like to send a couple of young students and young lawyers, even myself, that we get a bit better trained to understand all these legal proceedings in Europe. Because I have a small lobby office in Strasbourg. And we have one jurist there, there's a lady who works basically half-time. So we are a small organization. And I know it took her a couple of months really to understand the EU legislation which is going on just right in the moment. Now I have a friend of mine, he's running a lobby office of the Protestant Church in Brussels.
Founder of Halal.org, and what we've already started doing is to get the ball rolling. So I've been crossing paths with Philip, Chiquita UK, for the studio from MCP, and what we're concerned about obviously is that there's a lack of serious coordination, and we still have the 11th hour to actually get together, and we're very good at that with the heats on, to actually make some changes. So we've already been lobbying the MEPs. So if you go to the BeHalal.org website, you will see that we've started a poster campaign, but again, it's all to do with finance. We're a new startup organisation. We've started up as based on donations. The website, the poster, is kindly donated to have that designed. In order to get it out on the ground, it needs money, it needs people to invest, pull together, for us to have PR companies like Huda, who I've been in touch with, to actually get the people on the ground to know this is a serious problem that's going to happen and will jeopardise our long impact of actually getting our hands on halal food. It's a way of controlling Muslims, and I think people need to understand that there's a serious attack on Muslims in the media, campaigns done for a whole month in the UK carried out by the Daily Mail, and again, very little in the way of campaigns that were made. I made a campaign to the Press Commission, they told me 7 other people have campaigned, that's the whole of the 2.5